biggest brand in Virat Kohli. Okay, maybe the CSK fans may argue that it's Dhoni, but
Wow,
you get the drift.
Backpedal, bro.
You get the
do
drift.
law.
The auction strategy, and they're the butt of all jokes when they go into the auction. RCB doing RCB things.
They get a lot of trolling. Let's just be open about this.
Yeah.
Please don't write in and tell us. We're just laying it out the way it is. This is not a judgment call, yeah.
And then within the next 14 to 15 hours, he was on a flight, a private jet, landed in Bangalore, jet lagged, with not knowing what time of the day it was, goes to the ground and scores 100. Guess who against whom? KKR, the team that let him go at the auction.
Yeah.
So one of the things that Vijay-Mallya went on to say publicly was that for sacking Charu Sharma was he wasn't being allowed to pick the team that he wanted. And Charu Sharma's argument is, do you think in my powers I could have stopped the big boss from picking who he wanted?
It's in the air. It's a six.
IDFC FIRST Bank presents Century of Stories Cricket. And once again, we have a fabulous, I call him expert. His name is Shashank Kishore. I'd asked for Shashank Manohar, ex-boss of BCCI, but apparently refused to come. And we have Shashank Kishore. Okay, that's not a good way to introduce you. He's a wonderful journalist. He's written some great pieces for ESPN Cricinfo on emerging Indian cricketers. And whoever he's talked about has become a superstar. He's got that lucky charm. So if you're a cricketer watching this, make sure he writes about you. That's one way to go to the top. Also writing a book on the topic you're going to discuss right now, which is the Bengaluru story of the IPL. As you can guess, RCB, what, where, how, what if, lots of what ifs. Tell us a bit about the book first, and then we'll get into our discussion.
Yeah, RCB as a subject has been pretty fascinating. I mean, a franchise that's been in IPL for 17 years. Without winning a title, yet they have
18 now, but who's counting?
18.
There's still time to go, yeah.
The largest fan base, the biggest fan base, the advertisers' dream, brands, a biggest brand in Virat Kohli. Okay, maybe the CSK fans may argue that it's Dhoni, but
Wow,
you
quick
get the
to
drift.
backpedal, bro.
You
You
get
should
the
do law.
So I mean, there's so much going for the franchise. I mean,
Also, huge superstar layout. If you look at the big names that have come and gone, I mean, you had a Chris Gayle, you had an ABD de Villiers, you had some really huge names in the beginning. Rahul Dravid, icon of Indian cricket, to set it all up. So you can't say talent-wise as good as any other team.
absolutely, yeah. That's a fascinating bit. So I mean, there are a lot of layers behind the scenes to unpack there. The auction strategy, and they're the butt of all jokes when they go into the auction. RCB doing RCB things.
They get a lot of trolling. Let's just be open about this.
Yeah.
Please don't write in and tell us. We're just laying it out the way it is. This is not a judgment call, yeah.
So yeah, a lot of things to unpack behind the scenes. How the Virat Kohli RCB relationship came to be. The only player who's associated with the same team, right?
So while writing your book, you obviously spent time in the RCB dressing room, the Chinnaswamy, meeting people, talking to...
Yeah, I mean, internally, no, of course. But
What does that mean?
I mean, it's, probably you'd be able to speak to the Prime Minister of India a lot easier than, getting access to the RCB players.
Really?
It's that hard. So there are quite a number of challenges. But that's that's where the journalistic thing comes in.
So it's more like an outsider's perspective. Then I thought you'd be inside the camp.
It's an outsider's perspective of having watched the team, observed the team.
So if Chennai pays you good money, you can write a really bad book. Again, we're kidding. Oh, I'm kidding. He's doing the serious stuff. So this is the story we're talking about here on the Century of Stories Cricket. Bengaluru, flattered to deceive. Look, nobody's going to put them down, but honestly, they're underachievers. They have to accept that. After 18, this is the 18th season. It's still going on, so it's possible that anything can happen. But 18 years without winning, with that kind of arsenal that you have over many of the seasons, almost all seasons, well equipped. So let's go right to the beginning. Tell us how it all started with Dr. Vijay-Mallya, not a practicing doctor, and Rahul Dravid, one of the greats of all time.
Yeah, interestingly, Vijay-Mallya's first choice of a team when the IPL idea was floated to him by Lalit Modi wasn't RCB. He was looking. He was after Mumbai and Kolkata because he'd established his business there, and Kolkata is where he was studying.
UB City, man.
So he had an emotional
Bangalore.
connect with Kolkata, and Mumbai is where his headquarters of his businesses were. So he was after those two teams, and then someone put in a word to him that he had at that point in time political ambitions as well. He was
in the
contesting in the elections in Karnataka and stuff. So someone told him that maybe you want to go to Bangalore because you're a Kannadiga by birth and heritage or whatever. So that's how the idea came to him. And then, as it turned out, he won the bid, the second costliest bid to earn the team after Mumbai Indians. So that's how the RCB signing came to be. Otherwise, fate had played out differently.
No, just to mention quickly there, for those who don't know the Vijay Mallya era, known as the most glamorous businessman of his time and generation. Let's not talk about how it ended, didn't end so well. But he had that factor. So he was bringing in with him a team which was like personifying himself. So you had that, I would say, the most flamboyant team image initially.
It was. I mean, a lot of players who featured in the first few years would vouch for unparalleled hospitality, whether it was on the field, off the field,
Good
in
boss?
the skies. He was a good boss. He loved everyone to have a good time, but he demanded results on the field as well, which
is
obviously
fair,
didn't
right?
come their way in the first couple of years, or the first year at least for sure. And then things started to slowly change. They made the final in the second year. They finished third in 2010. So in terms of results, it wasn't all that bad. I mean, everyone looks at IPL from prism of results and saying, they haven't won in 18 years. But if you actually look at just the last 4 or 5 years, for example, they made 4 playoffs in the last 5 seasons. They made the final.
They're always there.
They're always there. They made the
been
final
there.
in 2009. They made the final in 2011. They made the final in 2016.
Now, one of the criticisms of the 2008 team was that red ball specialists, there Wasim Jaffer, Chandrapal, there are a few of the best test players around. Fair comment?
I mean, data and analytics was at its very nascent stage at that point in time. Teams barely had any time to plan and prepare to assemble their squads because the team was only formed a few weeks, so everyone had to hit the ground running. And I know a lot of people in hindsight look at the RCB team and say it was a test team, but you just look at the quality of players that they had. Nathan Bracken, who was the number 1 T20 bowler at that point in time at the auction.
Became a member of parliament. Yeah.
Of course, he didn't play the season, but at that point, you didn't know that he wouldn't be available for the entire season or, parts of the season. So Nathan Bracken was the number 1 T20 bowler. Legend of Misbah-ul Haq, he just obviously played that T20
Missed
final
that-
against India, but
that last shot,
but his credentials as a T20 cricketer was, at an all-time high, possibly at that point in time. Then you had a fastest bowler in the world in Dale Steyn, who just about a couple of months prior to the auction had rolled over India for 76 on a green top in Ahmedabad. Then you had Zaheer Khan, Rahul Dravid, Anil Kumble, big India players. So I don't think at the surface it seemed like a bad call at all. Obviously, the proof was in the results, and once they kept spiraling from one loss to another, this entire perception gained momentum. But yeah, still no excuses or no.
This put out there, Chandrapal had a 70 odd ball 100 in test cricket as well.
Yeah.
And Misbah had a 56 ball equaling Viv Richards' record. Won't talk about the opposition and the conditions, etc. But it's not like all these red ball specialists couldn't play great T20 cricket as well. So in hindsight, it's easy to judge.
I think
people can say what
the
they want.
mistake that RCB made in that first season was in terms of being able to assemble local players to complement the big players. They went local, truly local, in terms of signing a lot of Karnataka players at that point. But unfortunately, they were either well past their prime, like someone like a Sunil Joshi, someone like a J. Arun Kumar, who are now coaches in the IPL, or they were picking absolute newbies and rookies who were probably unproven even at the domestic level at that point in time. So they couldn't find that balance to complement these big stars. The other big player that they had was Cameron White, who probably at that point had the highest ever T20 score, across the world, 140 or something. So their heart was in the right place in picking the squad that they did. But unfortunately, the results was everything in the end. And, once that didn't come their way, they started chopping and changing. So the test team logic, I think it was a little blown out of proportion. But yeah, results speak at the end of the day.
Okay, let's quickly digress into it's a slightly controversial topic. What really happened? You're writing a book, so you know. What really happened with the management in terms of the Rahul Dravid, let's say, fallout with Vijay Mallya? Charu Sharma played a very key role here. Was it actually his battle with Vijay Mallya? Tell us very quickly what happened.
Charu Sharma was the CEO who at one point realized that it wasn't just the cricket team that he was running. He was doing a lot of other things like, negotiating liquor contracts at different venues, which wasn't part of his job description. So at one point, Charu Sharma says he had signed, this wasn't what he had signed up for. And there were a lot of other things that he was, forced to do. And once the team started losing, it was almost, he felt as if the entire blame was on him. So one of the things that Vijay Mallya went on to say publicly was that for sacking Charu Sharma was he wasn't being allowed to pick the team that he wanted. And Charu Sharma's argument is, do you think in my powers I could have stopped the big boss from picking who he wanted? Because everything was controlled by him, right from the color of the jersey to what are the sponsors that you want to line up. In fact, there was an incident where Charu Sharma was in a negotiation with a big mobile handset manufacturer to come on board as a principal sponsor, and they were very keen. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, and they went on to sign with KKR. He comes back, and Vijay Mallya, you'd think that he'd be disappointed. But he's like, I have all my brands that I'm going to be putting across the jersey. There's nothing left to do here, so don't worry about it. So he was actually working extra hard to do things outside, but he felt that at one point in time it got a little suffocating because he wasn't being able to execute the thing that he was signed in for. So it went beyond just cricket, and I think that played a hand in Charu Sharma going out midway through the season. A couple of other coaches were also on the firing line, but because the backlash of Charu Sharma signing and the resignation played out the way it did in the media, I think they resisted change at that point in time. In fact, Ray Jennings, who was the coach for the second year onwards, even before the first season finished, he was interviewed for the position, and that's how far they were thinking at that point in time, because the entire coaching staff was on the firing line at that point in time. Martin Crowe, who was obviously the
mentor,
head of, director of cricket at that point in time, had come in, and and the entire setup actually had to leave at the end of the first season. But Ray Jennings was interviewed halfway through the first season for a job that he didn't know he wanted to take, but was convinced to take at the end of the first season on a number of conditions that he put forward. And eventually it worked out well for RCB. But in the first season, I think it got to a point where Mallya wanted Rahul Dravid also to be removed as captain. But I think the backlash that he faced with all the off-field, drama surrounding the resignations of the CEO and stuff dissuaded him eventually.
But we can say this much openly, that obviously the relationship was never the same after that.
Between Mallya and RCB?
Between Mallya and Rahul.
Rahul went on to play the 2009 season. He had a great year, in fact, in 2009 and played a key role in the team, reviving themselves, going to the finals. Did really well in 2010, both in the IPL and the Champions League. So he still contributed a lot to the player. Astonishingly, until recently, I was reading a stat. Outside of Virat Kohli, Rahul Dravid was the second highest run getter for RCB for many, many years. Until, Indian. So, so that just shows that he was a contributor who doesn't kind of get the due that he deserved. But I think as a cricketer, if you ask him, I'm sure he'd agree that he was in a much happier space just being a player rather than, worrying about captaincy and stuff. Because Rahul Dravid, being the typical traditionalist and a family man, wouldn't attend these parties. And Mallya, being the glamour, looking after the glamour, wanted, the big figures of Indian cricket being there at all parties to, please the
He needed more Gayle and less Dravid.
So there was a lot more than just cricket which Dravid had to contend with in that first season, which didn't obviously work out.
IDFC First Fact. A team with one of the most passionate fan bases, Bengaluru, in 2018 decided to retire their number 12 jersey for their fans, who are called the 12th Man Army. In 2023, they even went on to retire AB de Villiers and Chris Gale's jersey numbers, which are 17 and 333. Can we just rewind there for a second? 2009, they made the final. So second year in fact. Yet in 2011, they had a clean sweep of the players.
Yeah, that
no
was
retention.
That was the first time that the IPL was bringing out the retention rules, and it was made clear that.
No, but you did decently well the year before. So why was it a complete change of personnel?
Primarily it was down to them wanting to rehash because you had a lot of aging stars in the team. And Anil Kumble had just retired from international cricket a couple of years ago, so he wanted to move on to a mentorship role. Rahul Dravid was towards the last stages of his career, so they wanted somebody who could take the brand forward and live up to that image of that.
Who made those decisions? Since you're writing a book, I'm asking you, if you're on the know, who makes those hard decisions with the great personalities?
So interestingly, Vijay Mallya had a management team with him, but the final call was all his. So, he could have probably consulted five different
Just going
people.
back to whatever little we've worked with him in the past, etc. He was a hands-on guy when it came to all this. Maybe up to the point where people were like, difficult to
So
work with.
hands-on that, some people told me that if they had to change a stripe in the t-shirt or a color that had to go out, his signing was needed. And even if it meant flying in from Barcelona from a Formula 1 race to, Bangalore overnight at 2 a.m. to have a meeting to,
What happened to COC?
yeah,
Sorry, CTC, Cost to Company.
Yeah, so he was that hands-on, which at one point kind of became a little suffocating for some people in the setup, and you saw that with the CEO in the first season leaving midway. So there were a lot of things that happened behind the scenes in the first season that they tried to iron out over the next few years, which they did to an extent. But
his heart was in the right place.
His heart was in the right
cricket,
place.
He loved sports.
Cricket,
he loved lots of sports. And he was really pushing for it. And that marriage between the whole Bengaluru feeling and UB and himself and, the brand, the RCB brand. I mean, out of all the brands, was exactly, it was homegrown in that sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Virat Kohli fit that image perfectly of somebody who was equally good on the field, and he had this
Isn't his
ability
wife
to become a brand.
Isn't his wife grew up in Bangalore, if I'm not mistaken?
I think she did, yeah.
So he's got that connection.
So there was some. I mean, he wasn't married back then, so that really.
Vijay Mallya couldn't decide that. There's a limit to what his decision power goes to. He had to pull back from there. Yeah.
Right. So Virat Kohli at that point fit all the bill. He had a breakout year in 2010 as a one-day cricketer.
Yeah.
He had just scored a couple of wonderful hundreds. He'd done well for RCB in the Champions League the following year, the previous year rather. And Ray Jennings, who was their coach, he was this taskmaster of sorts. You couldn't be his buddy, so he sat Virat Kohli down at the end of the 2009 season where RCB.
He's a Greg Chappell-like figure.
He was. I mean, I don't know if he was a Greg Chappell-like figure, but he was certainly a tough taskmaster.
Not a Democrat.
Players. So. So players couldn't obviously put his hand up, around the shoulder and say, "What's up? Let's have a coffee or let's have a drink." So he was a authoritative figure who, players maintained a distance. There was a healthy relationship. There was mutual respect. So he had the command over the entire team. So he sat Virat Kohli down at the end of 2009 or early 2010 and said, I see a future captain in you, not just for RCB but India. And for that, you'll have to make certain changes to your game, certain changes to your lifestyle. It can't continue the way it is. I don't want you to be happy scoring 20s and 30s at number 5 and number 6, which he was doing at that point in time. I want you to take the batting mantle of this team. Yet, after all the recommendations, the final call lay with the boss. And
but let's stop here for a second. Yeah. I don't know how... Guys, this is what Shashank is saying. Nobody knows what the truth is in terms of Ray Jennings influenced Virat in terms of his fitness, diet, approach to the game. You're saying all that as well?
He didn't influence him, but he just sat him down and told him that this is what I think you should do. You have the potential to take your game here. And if you're able to do this...
This is a 21, 22-year-old Virat. This is a young kid and he's talking about captain of India, etc., etc.
Yeah. After his first season, and Kohli's first 2 seasons weren't the best for RCB. It took him about 3 years to find his footing. So at that point in time, his career graph was on the upswing. I mean, he was... a certainty in India's one-day plans.
Correct.
It looked like he'd make the 2011 World Cup, which he eventually did. So retention was, it seemed like a no-brainer at that point in time. The only question was, who else they would retain. And at that point, it was decided that Kohli would be the only one because, as I said, Rahul Dravid was in his last stages of his career. Ross Taylor was one of the OGs of RCB before Gayle and ABD de Villiers wasn't retained.
And I heard Ross Taylor hit the ball harder than anybody else. A lot of people have gone on record to say that. He's still forgotten his power hitting was as good as anybody else's because not celebrated for that.
Yeah. He wasn't. Incidentally, the day, the RCB management team came to the hotel to, sign Virat Kohli's contract of retention, it was Ross Taylor who they bumped into first in the hotel lift when they're going up to Virat's room, and then Ross Taylor, being the man that he is, kind of joked around to say that I know you guys are not retaining me and I know who you're after. So they bumped into him, and then...
How do you know this story, bud?
I mean, it just...
Were you in the lift, Shashank?
I wasn't in the lift, but I spoke to a lot of people who did the the contract, and all of this played out in a 48-hour dramatic 48 hours leading into the auction being sealed and signed with the BCCI headquarters in Bombay, and just few hours before the eventual contract had to be delivered to the RCB office by post or by person, no emails and whatever. Virat was in Baroda for a one-day international between India and New Zealand. So it was on the sidelines of that training session that all the negotiations had taken place. They decided they'd retain him, but Virat was slightly at that point in time apprehensive because there was a certain clause that said 20% of your fee would be withheld, because if your team doesn't qualify for the Champions League, this is the amount that will be deducted or whatever.
Oh my God.
So
but these contracts, I would call them Americanized contracts, are becoming more and more, I think it's commonplace now, right?
Yeah.
It sounds a little draconian, but it's commonplace. And it's almost like people in the corporate world where you're given targets and you have to reach it, or, your entire job description depends on that. But just quickly come to this point, there's a lot of pressure on the cricketers which we don't seem to understand now, and I'm wondering if it's a good thing. So you're playing for India, but your mind is now on the contract, which is huge, and your future, etc., tied to that. We just had the BGT when the cricketers are also their mind towards the end of the BGT are go towards the IPL auction that's going on, and not just Indians. We're talking about across the world, the foreigners as well. So you think this is a little bit of a dangerous thing that I'm getting so scared about international cricket, all the time. Because these overriding contracts, and the contracts are ruthless, as you've just mentioned, and they're sometimes unbelievably strict. But it's very difficult for you to imagine the cricketer is not distracted.
I mean, that's a reality of modern day sport. I mean, I remember being at an under-19 World Cup in New Zealand in 2018, and that was the day that Shubman Gill, Prithvi Shaw, and all the youngsters who were part of that batch were coming up for auction. And then Rahul Dravid, had just spoken to the entire team and said, life doesn't start and end with an IPL auction. You guys are just 17 or 18. You've got maybe 10, 15, 20 years ahead of you. One auction doesn't make or break you. So it took a lot of effort for him to, at that point in time, control the boys. But he said, I don't want to pretend that it's not important. It is important. So you guys want to follow it. Don't do it behind your backs, or don't do it, quietly at the side of a practice session. Take the day off, soak in everything that you need to, come back to training the next day. So it's the reality of modern sport. I mean, I think a lot of players are used to it now. But at that point in 2008, 2009, 2010, all of it was a novelty. So Virat's brother, Vikas, older brother, he was, on the phone line, he was discussing. So it needed a little more than just a player and player agents, and everything was at a nascent stage at that point in time. So all of it felt like a maze to certain players. Those who handled it better, obviously had their way. Those who couldn't, obviously did a lot of negotiations, whatever. So the thing that I'm trying to say is that at that point in time, the auction wasn't the be all and end all. You could also sign players outside the auction. So all of it led to certain rules coming into the picture that wasn't very clear. A lot of players had questions on, agents saying that agents are coming up to our room and saying that, ye dilwa dunga, gaadi dilwa dunga, ghar dilwa dunga. So a lot of players were confused whether to go for it, not go for
This
it.
is outside the contract.
This is outside the contract in the first couple of years, where teams could sign players outside.
So legally, illegally.
The uncapped players I'm talking about.
Uh-huh.
So uncapped players at a fixed fee of 10 lakh.
Yeah.
And they could be picked by any of the teams.
Yeah.
But there were a lot of people behind the scenes who were trying to, influence players into saying,
I want to bring this into podcast.
this is what
Great
you
idea.
want to play. So this is what we give you when you come into our team. So it took the IPL also as a brand to, build some framework over a period of time. And that's what they tried with this retention in 2010. So, yeah, a lot of things there that happened behind the scenes before the auction.
So his book will, of course, reveal everything in more detail. We have only maybe this many minutes to have a conversation here. But I want to go a little ahead now. So this is the Virat Kohli generation now, which goes on for a long time.
And interestingly, Virat wasn't the first one to be on RCB's radar. It was Manish Pandey, who they really wanted.
Right.
And Manish and Virat were teammates in the India Under-19 World Cup. The Under-19 World Cup was going on. And then the BCCI realized that, these guys are getting television coverage now, so there's a lot of potential in them featuring in the IPL. So a lot of scouts and team owners, through their agents or whatever, started queuing up at the team hotel in Malaysia to sign players outside of the auction. And Virat Kohli was obviously there, Manish Pandey was there, Shrivats Goswami was there. So all of them were in talks with different teams, and RCB had reached out to Manish, and Manish said, yes, I'm happy to sign. And RCB was to, float a contract with terms and conditions.
He was also playing for Karnataka. So
he was playing for
again,
Karnataka.
You got the
as
home
well.
boy
Home
advantage.
ground advantage as well. So, but the day he was supposed to sign the contract, Manish rings up and says that, I'm happy to sign, but people have turned up saying that this is what we'll do and we'll give you all these things.
The other franchise.
Other franchises saying you don't sign with RCB or whichever team.
So he was negotiating in terms of.
So other people were trying to stop him, saying we'll give you this, you sign with us. And when Manish reported this back to,
Achha, so RCB turned their back on him.
When Manish reported this back to RCB, Vijay Mallya, rang up Lalit Modi and spoke to Sharad Pawar, and then immediately that entire process of signing players outside the auction or
they sort of complained.
Was stopped. So the BCCI put their foot down. The message was sent to the team manager in Malaysia saying, stop this process of players negotiating, or teams negotiating with players. And it was then they decided that, they'll bring in a draft process in place after the World Cup. So that is when it was formalized that each team would have 2 picks and it'll be drawn by random lots. So RCB's turn was second. And the moment Delhi didn't pick Virat Kohli, and they had won the World Cup by then, by the time the draft came around. In a quarter of a millisecond, Vijay Mallya said, RCB, thank you. And Virat Kohli, thank you. And that's how Virat Kohli came to be. So had the earlier negotiations thing gone on, probably you would have Manish Pandey, who would be RCB's first pick right now, and not Virat Kohli.
And Manish's first few years were very good. Also, he's tapered off a little bit towards the last few, but he really took off. Who knows what would have happened?
They eventually signed him at the transfer window in 2009, and he hit 100 in 2009 in that season in South Africa, and then, went on to achieve a lot of things for Karnataka, and was one of the curious cases in Indian cricket. I mean, I don't think he realized
should have got
his
more
potential.
chances. But there's a luck factor.
Exactly.
We'll do a separate one on Manish Pandey. But in the meantime, we'll get back to the Virat Kohli story with RCB. So that now we reach the middle period where he's the captain. Not middle period, but 3-4 years have gone. And you start getting some A-grade players, top of the line players for this format as well.
Yeah.
So take us through that period now. And I mean, it's such a difficult question to ask. I know you're sick of answering it, and it's probably... After some time, it's the beauty of sport that you can put any names on a sheet, but you still can't win in any sport. So, take us through that for a little while.
So, 2010, they'd made the semi-final. But again, 2011 was a new auction cycle. The mega auction comes and goes. Virat is the only one retained. And the auction, they pay big money to get AB de Villiers, who incidentally was to be retained by Delhi 1 week prior to the auction. And then finally, on the day the retention list comes out, he doesn't find his name. So, he doesn't know...
So Delhi let go of Virat Kohli previous seasons and then let go of AB de Villiers. Who was in charge of Delhi? Oh, sorry, I mean cricketing terms. I come back here.
Yeah, so they got Gayle at the auction. They got Tilak.
And Gayle had floated 2-3 teams.
Sorry.
Before that.
I'm getting ahead of myself. Gayle wasn't at the auction. Gayle came in as a replacement in the 2011 season. At that point in time, Chris Gayle was, involved in a bit of a tussle with the West Indies Cricket Board over payments or contracts or whatever. So they weren't keen on playing him. But at that point in time, before the auction, West Indies was scheduled to have a series in the summer that clashed with the IPL. So none of the teams went for Chris Gayle at that point in time, thinking that he's probably going to be playing international cricket. When the actual reason was, he wasn't, and he was in negotiations with the WICB. RCB brought in a fast bowler called Dirk Nannes from Australia, who's also played for the Netherlands. And when he got injured, Chris Gayle, a call went out to Chris Gayle, who was probably partying in a beach in Miami or Jamaica or wherever. And then within the next 14 to 15 hours, he was on a flight, a private jet, landed in Bangalore, jet lagged, not knowing what time of the day it was, goes to the ground and scores 100. Guess who against whom? KKR, the team that let him go at the auction. And that started another fascinating love between Chinnaswamy and Gayle, Gayle and RCB, and that continued for the next 5-6 years.
He played some fantastic knocks. I think he just raised the bar.
He raised the bar and made 175 towering sixes.
I remember. That's still the most unplayable knock. It's unbelievable, really.
And more than just contributing to the team, he was such a laid-back, relaxed character off it. No amount of brand shoots.
Real star.
Endorsements, nothing phased him. If he had to be there for a shoot, his only condition was nothing in the first half of the day. That's the time I sleep. I go to sleep at 5 a.m. Don't disturb me until 2 in the afternoon.
But that's fair because these guys are playing cricket at 7:30 in the evening.
Yeah.
So what do you want them to do also?
So that was his only criteria. But he had the time.
So he was a great guy for the Vijay Mallya brand because he was very fashionable, very hip, very out there, very party, and yet super talented. The perfect match in a sense. So was Virat. The young Virat was also
so
very
was Virat. So
extroverted
was AB de Villiers. AB de Villiers had this he wasn't the De Villiers who he went on to become, or
The Mr. 360
half
comes
of the-
later.
Yeah. At that point in time, he was still a fairly good player, but
Yeah.
someone who hadn't truly realized his potential. And I think at RCB, he had that freedom. He had that. He developed that persona, and became a fan favorite very quickly. And
I think also maybe Gayle took pressure off him, because Gayle at the top
Yeah.
would very often said people are not watching you so much because Gayle has taken over the game very often. I mean, it's that kind of personality then.
Gayle, Tilak Ratne, Dilshan used to give
Oh
them
my
great
God, yeah, I forgot about
starts.
him.
Virat
Yeah.
Kohli coming in, so AB de Villiers had a platform more often.
While we're on the topic of great cricketers who have turned out for Bengaluru, let me share something great with you all. IDFC FIRST Bank has achieved something truly remarkable with their NRI banking services. You can open an account from anywhere in the world, transfer funds 24/7, and get a dedicated relationship manager 24/7 as well. Now that's what I call achieving greatness in banking. Again, this is a very tough, this is beyond science. We can't explain why a team which has the 4-5 names we mentioned, big names, plenty of decent cricketers from the Indian diaspora as well, not able to do better than 1 or 2 finals in 17 seasons.
Yeah.
And especially in that peak period of 5-6 seasons where they were really packed with stars. So there's nothing we can say. There's no cricketing logic.
I mean, Virat Kohli's greatest strength as a captain during his time with the Indian team was in building a gun bowling attack
Yeah.
that could win and take 20 wickets in test matches overseas. But unfortunately, they couldn't follow, or they couldn't, bring that same principles into T20 cricket at RCB. I mean, every season, they'd go in with the biggest purse, they'd go in with the biggest superstars, they'd go in with big batting lineups. But somehow they always had the sense that they were compromising on their bowling front, and that didn't do them any favors. There was one season, I think in 2017, where they were bowled out for 49 in Kolkata
correct, yeah.
against the KKR, and then the next year, all the 4 guys who were involved in getting them bowled out for 49 were part of the RCB because they seemingly thought that
Let's get these guys. Yeah.
in a lighter vein, of course, but let's get these guys. I mean, and bring them in, and then they went on to have a shocker of seasons for RCB the following year. So it's not down to just personnel at some point. It's also down to tactics. And RCB we have to admit, they weren't the biggest team in terms of, they didn't have the best scouting network. In the first few years, it was non-existent. They tried to iron it out over the following years. It's a lot more robust and streamlined now, but yeah, 2017-18.
So you're coming back to the other theory that IPL is actually won by your regular Indian cricketers. And maybe there was too much reliance on the foreign cricketers and the superstars of Indian cricket as well.
Indian players are as important as the 4 overseas players. I mean, in the first few years of the IPL, a lot of teams built their core around the 4 foreigners and that one Indian marquee player that they had signed at the auction.
Yeah.
And the uncapped players made, for the lack of a better word, the bits and pieces, if you can call it.
Sanjay Manjrekar, if you're listening, no, I'm just
So, yeah, and they realized that going forward, Mumbai Indians kind of set a trend. Jasprit Bumrah became a trendsetter way before he was, the OG today that he is, in terms of, a scout, what a scouting process can bring to the table. And the moment the other teams realized that, this is something that they also have to invest in and start to, they started to take domestic cricket a lot more seriously. They started going around looking at Indian talent in different T20 leagues. And a lot of the RCB picks that you have today are also products of the system. Rajat Patidar, for example.
Yeah, but if we have more time, we would get into the fact that you look at Mumbai Indians, 5-time winners, Chennai similar, and put them against RCB, and then look at the personnel in terms of quality and see, where they stand. We'll do that another day. We don't have enough time. Let's go into the change in business in the owners. As Dr. Mallya, unfortunately, let's not pass a judgment here, Dr. Mallya disappears from the circuit because of issues that he's having, non-cricketing issues, and Diageo takes over. So you'd think that maybe that would be lucky for them, etc., but not really.
I mean, at that point in time, if fate had played out slightly differently, then the entire franchise may have been sold, at least partly, if not fully, to JSW, the Path Jindal group, who went on to
Delhi.
pick up a stake in Delhi Capitals. They were very keen on RCB because they had a hugely successful football club in Bangalore, the Bengaluru FC, and they were doing great in Bangalore, the ISL. They had come in, they had captivated the fan base in the city. And under Sunil Chetri, they had found a Virat Kohli-like figure in the football team. So they wanted to translate
they brought back now
something
25 years of
similar
retirement.
in the cricketing ecosystem in the city, and that's where they were very keen on, buying a stake at RCB, and those negotiations, I think, didn't play out the way they would have liked to, and eventually they went on to the Capitals, and with the partnership with the JMR Group. So, and then a huge multinational in Diageo comes in without any biases of running sport with profits. At the end of the day, for them it was profits and the balance sheet that was the most important thing, and performances were obviously a byproduct, but that the profits at the end told you a story. So they were keen and they ran it like a corporate entity. They still do. They brought in overhauled their coaching structure in 2020, bringing on Mike Hesson on board. They brought in a scouting system. They in fact even brought in a scouting process for the women's team long before they actually owned the team. For a year before the WPL came into the picture, for example, they had an entire set of scouts who used to go across the country to look at the young women players
for a potential
not even before they had the team, only so that they weren't left behind or they weren't caught off guard when they eventually formed the team. So they've tried to bring in the best practices from corporate practices.
And then they went on to win in the second season of the WPL.
Went on to win the first ever title for RCB.
Smriti was the captain,
Mandana. So they've tried to run it like a corporate entity. But of course, as the joke goes in Bangalore, RCB is a content marketing team that also plays cricket. It's an entertainment brand that also plays cricket. Cricket is part at the forefront, marginal, of course. But there are other interests that
What is that famous slogan?
Ee Sala Cup Namde. I mean, that's become epic. Part of the Bangalore lingo now every year.
So what's the reason for that?
I mean, it was a term that was borrowed from Bengaluru FC when they won the ISL for the first time, or I think they made the final. I'm not a football fan, so you'll have to verify that. They had a massive fan following. There was an entire stand called the West Block Blues, who used to occupy one portion of the Kantira football stadium in Bangalore, and they used to go on this chanting spree. And one of those chants was Ee Sala Cup Namde, which translates to this time the cup is ours. And I think the team responded, and it soon went viral on social media, and everyone started resonating with that term. That it slowly went on to the RCB team. So at a press conference or at one of the promotional events, when Virat Kohli was asked and he blurted out these lines, that's when everyone caught on to it, and it's followed the team, and it's been an albatross around the neck for many years now. I don't know how many years more it will. Maybe hopefully this year is the year. But yeah, that's the origin of the term. So it's not an RCB term. It was borrowed
but
from
it's a Bengaluru team term. So it's very much part of the locality. But before we wind up, now we're recording this while the 18th season, in fact, it just started. I don't want to tell you to put your hand up and say they'll win or not win. But do you think if they win, that they have the potential, RCB, with whatever personnel they have, to win 3-4 in a row then suddenly? Because the whole thing kind of changes. Like some of the big teams in the past, I think in Australia it's happened, I think it was Queensland. You don't win for many years, and the moment you break that glass ceiling or get through, then suddenly there's a glut of good performances.
I mean, they've ticked every box to be able to do that. For example, fundamentally, before every auction, they've gone in with the superstars. This time around, barring Kohli, of course, who's already said this is the only team that he'll play for. They've stripped their auction strategy of all the external noise. They've only gone for role specific players. I mean, not after names but roles, and they've assembled a squad that to the outside may seem like okay, where are the superstars here outside of Kohli? But they've got players who've performed for so many years, and they've also deviated from their norm of naming a superstar captain.
They let Faf go,
and they've named somebody who in a sense is
who's not played for
he's not an India superstar.
India T20 superstar.
Yeah, he's a domestic stalwart. He's played really well.
Yeah.
And in naming him, they've kind of deviated from their norm. So they're trying to do something different. There's an idea, there's a vision. Andy Flower has
But they believe the next 4-5 years will be the Patidar years. What would be the logic?
Hopefully. I mean, I think he's and Patidar is another interesting story because he was nearly not bought by the team. I mean, 2021 was his first season. And then 2022, he was let go. I mean, they didn't even bid for him. After, incidentally, he was told that we'll bid for you. So here he is, not being picked by the team. And he goes and plans his wedding, saying, anyway, I'm not playing the IPL, let me get married. And then his...
you need one circus or the
other. His family books a wedding venue and stuff. And then the next day he gets a call from Mike Hesson saying, come in, we need a replacement. And he takes the flight, gets on, and a week later in Kolkata in a playoff, he hits 100.
Shashank, what kind of story is this? What happened to his wife? To be?
Yeah.
They're at the reception while he's at Chinnaswamy, hitting 100.
The thing, yeah, and at Eden Gardens.
What a beautiful story.
and he hits 100 there, and his career takes off from there. So from not being retained to being a replacement, he comes into the RCB team, and now 2 years on, he's captain of the franchise. So they've kind of bucked this trend of trying to go after superstars, after big names. In terms of in having named him, they feel he's a measured personality to take this team forward, and who knows, maybe this is the year.
All right. One last thing I'd like to say, Virat Kohli, real ultimate team man, but I've noticed even when he's stripped off captaincy, international captaincy or whatever, doesn't phase him really. He's absolutely fully on. He's always fully involved with his team and gives it, his body language is always very, he's not one of those guys who sulks or anything. So I think it's a good thing to have him there with Rajat in this initial, let's say, first season, maybe 2 seasons at least.
I think Kohli is enjoying the best of both worlds. I mean, as a senior player, he's very much part of the leadership group. But in a tournament like the IPL, being a captain isn't just restricted to, marshalling your resources on the field. There's so much off the field that, goes in planning of batting meetings, planning or meeting with the bowlers, with the coaches, with the support staff, with the owners, sponsor commitments. There's so much that goes around that sometimes it can get very suffocating, demanding for a captain. And I think Virat Kohli today is in that kind of space where, he wants to be away from that. Which you've seen in the Indian team as well. He likes spending time with his family when he's not playing. So he's enjoying the responsibilities without actually being in that hot seat. So he's still contributing, and I think it's personally a great decision that they've now looked to build a team to the future. And probably, as you said, maybe 3-4 years later, you could have a situation where once that first trophy comes, probably you'll have 2 or 3 more. Yeah.
Shashank, thank you so much for being with us here. Your book will be out as well, hopefully in the next few months. And when it is out or comes out, hopefully you can fill in that last chapter according to, what happens in the future.
It nearly happened last year in 2024 when won 6 out of the last 7 games, made an unreal run to the playoff, and you were wondering whether this is the year, and then suddenly, it goes down. But again, another year, another opportunity.
Keep praying, RCB fans, keep praying. It's called IDFC FIRST Bank presents Century of Stories Cricket. This was Shashank Kishore, a lovely writer who's spent most of his time in Bangalore, but give us 20 minutes in Mumbai to present this program. Thank you very much, sir. Before we bid adieu, a quick safety tip from IDFC FIRST Bank and me for you. One of the oldest frauds in the fraud industry is identity theft. The fraudsters get a hold of vital instruments like your check or KYC documents, and they try to impersonate you and apply for loans or open another account under your name. To prevent this, keep a close eye on your banking activities. Never share any personal information before verifying the person you're talking to.